good afternoon, good evening. The title of the shir is the mitzvahs that our forefathers did and their impact on our generation. And the reason, I would say two reasons why I chose to speak about this topic. It's still Rosh Chodesh Kislev, it's Aleph Kislev, we have a few weeks till Hanukkah. But this topic is very relevant to the Parshas we're in. Certainly Parshas Toldos, the Ramban speaks about in this week's Parsha. Idea that did the others really do all the mitzvahs? It comes up, on the way here, I was thinking through, it comes up in Parshas Toldos, comes up in Parshas Vayetze, comes up in Parshas Vayishlach, Vayeshev, it comes up in Parshas Miketz. I'm not sure about Vayigash, but it comes up in Parshas Vayechi. So that's one reason, very relevant to the Parshas that we're learning right now, we're hearing right now. The second reason is, I remember a long time ago when Yeshiva University started the series on Torah Ramada. And everyone knows they spent a number of years, and every year a journal came out. And my father gave the inaugural shir on Torah Ramada. And the first year he spoke about why it's important to be a Torah Jew, to understand the Chachmas HaOlam, science, and all the various Chachmas. And the second shir, which he gave a year later, and both shirim were to a packed crowd in Lamp Auditorium, he spoke about the various contradictions between, I'm sorry, I apologize, various perceived contradictions between the Torah and science. And he introduced his words and he said, why am I talking about this? Because I think he said, the truth is, it doesn't really bother me. That's what I think he was thinking. As my uncle once said, he said, if someone finds a contradiction in Torah and science, it doesn't bother me, because either we don't understand the Torah, or we don't understand the science. But he says, why did my father choose to give a shir? Actually, I think it's the shir is written up in logic of heart, logic of the mind. But he chose to give the shir because when he was a young man, he was actually an avelus for his father. He says, someone in avelus, so he was always looking for a minion. So he once walked into a shul in New York City, it must have been the Lower East Side, I'm not sure even, maybe it was in Washington Heights, and to daven Ma'ariv. And as he walked in, the Rav of the shul was still giving a shir. They call it a shtibel. And he said, I sat down to listen to the rest of the shir, which I think was a fantastic idea in Musar too. My father sat down to listen to a shir. And at that time, the Rav was learning the Gemara in Erev and Daf Yud Tes. Gemara in Erev and Daf Yud Tes speaks about the fact that in the valley of Ben Hinnom, there's two palm trees, which smoke comes out from in between. And that's the entrance to Gehenna. Okay? And my father said, I saw that the Balabatim were sitting around and they were smirking. I thought it was very funny. And he says, that always bothered me, that people would make fun of Chazal because they thought that the Pshat in the Gemara, and the Torah and the Pshat in the Gemara went against science, and they laughed. So for this reason, I was very happy to give this shir. Okay, this is not a shir in Torah Ramada, so I'm not going to deal with that issue. I think it must be in the book. But the same reason when it comes to the various midrash and various gemaras, where Chazal do say and do imply that the Avos kept Kol Torah Kula, there are a lot of people that poke fun in a public way, in a private way. Someone from my shoulders came up to me and said to me, I was at a shir 2 weeks ago, and someone was going ahead and speaking about this medrash and talking about the details, nuances of halacha, of Avmino kept it, and sometimes it sounded to me a little ridiculous. And the reason why I mentioned this, I don't know if any of you saw it, but a number of years ago, there was a video that went viral, I think. In that video, someone was making fun, a cartoon, of two Yeshiva Vachrim arguing whether Avram Avinu or Yitzchak Yaakov wore Crocs on Yom Kippur. And what's the basis for this argument? Because Rav Elyashiv holds Crocs are usher. So the question is, did Avram Avinu follow the Chumrah of Rav Elyashiv? And the point of the video is to make fun of a certain idea that goes out there, but indirectly I think it made fun of the Medrash also. So that's why I'm actually quite happy to give the shir. However, I want to make one disclaimer. I really have no clue what the Avos did. Okay, that's what I'm saying. I wasn't there. I only know the various texts, and we'll try to learn and see what they did. But I think what's more important is the idea that's behind it. Now, for example, I just gave a shiur to some students of mine on the whole idea of shadim, demons. Young kids love to learn about demons. And I said, it's not important whether or not shadim exist or don't exist. What's really important is what's the meaning behind it? What were Chazal trying to impart to us? And the same thing that comes here. But we have to learn the sugya. So let's begin now. I would just say before I begin, I want to mention introduction, and I'll come back and explain it in the context of the shiur. But in source number 6, the Tzlach, it's Noda B'Yehuda. So he points out, he says his words are, these are words. He says that Aval Bezel Lekaman Depalig Sheichmiru Al Atzman V'Kimu Kol HaTorah. No one argues on this. Everyone agrees that the Avos kept the whole Torah of Apil Avar Tavshilin. So I was telling this to someone in my shul. He says, because I mentioned the Netziv holds that they have the whole Torah. He says, really? So I told him that Tzlach says no one argues. We'll see if nobody argues. Let's go. So let's start with the sugyas. It's actually 3 Gemaras. So the Gemara which is most specific is Gemara Maseches Yuma. And the Gemara there is discussing, actually just the context of the sugya is Maseches Yuma. Gemara is discussing it seems that Avram Avinu, yes, even though everyone feels that Yitzchak was the one with Daven Mincha, the Gemara refers to Mincha as Tzlusei da Avraham. And most Rama say that even though Yitzchak daven Mincha, Avram Avinu also daven Mincha. And when did Avram Avinu daven Mincha? He daven Mincha at Chatzos. Now we know that we don't daven Mincha at Chatzos. We wait for what time? We wait for a half an hour after Chatzos. So if Chatzos midday is 12 o'clock, we won't daven Mincha until approximately 12:30. But Avram Avinu, he daven Mincha at Chatzos at 12, whatever time it was. So the Gemara asks, so how come we don't daven at Chatzos like Avram Avinu? Gemara says, listen, Avram Avinu, first of all, was an astronomer, so he understood everything about what goes on in the heavens. Okay, no one has problems with that. And Avram Avinu was a zaken Yoshev Yeshiva, and therefore, since he was a zaken at Yoshev Yeshiva and he was involved in Torah Hashem, there was a certain siyata d'shmaya, assistance from heaven, that he would never get it wrong. We're not in the same level of Avram Avinu, so therefore we can't daven mincha until a half after midday, because if we daven at midday, we might make a mistake. So the Gemara there in that context goes through. I'm not going to go through everything. It's not really relevant to us. But the Gemara says that, as a matter of fact, the Jewish people for generations were Yoshev B'Yeshiva. In Mitzrayim, they learned Torah in yeshiva. He says, and then the Gemara goes on. Gemara says, in the Midbar there was a yeshiva, and Avraham, and referred to whenever you see the word zakein, it must mean that they were learning Torah in yeshiva. Avram was Yoshev B'Yeshiva, as to Avram zakein b'bayamim, Yitzchak, and so then it goes on. It's like this. And then it says, and then Yitzchak is not in the Gemara here, but it's in the Gemara, it's not on the page. Yitzchak was Yoshev B'Yeshiva, as it says, that before Yitzchak gave the brachos, that Yitzchak was Zakein, he says, and Yaakov was Yoshev B'Yeshiva, and then it says like this, Amar Rav, the third line, Dav Chav Chesem Abeis, of the Daf Mekoros, Kayim Avram Avinu, Kol HaTorah Kula. Avram Avinu was Mekayim, the whole Torah, everything. As we see from this week's parasha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Yitzchak, I'm going to give you Eretz Yisrael, Ekev Sheshama Avram B'Koli. He says, so Gemara asked the question, just because Avram Avinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Avram, listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, does that mean that it was Mekayim Kol Torah Kula? Maybe it was Mekayim just the 7 Noachide laws, Sheva Mitzvos. So Gemara says, or maybe Mitzvahs Milah. So he says that if he was Mekayim only the Zayin Mitzvah Bnei Noach, the 7 Noachide laws, and the Mitzvah of Milah, the Gemara would have said just Shama Avram B'Koli, but the Torah would have said Shama Avram B'Koli, but the Torah adds the word Mitzvosai V'Sorasai, and therefore that means he was Mekayim the whole Torah. And not only was Mekayim the whole Torah, so Rabashi says, last line of source number 1, Kayim Avram Avinu afil Erev Tavshilin. Avram Avinu was Mekayim fulfilled even Erev Tavshilin. If Yontif comes out on a Friday, just Erev Tavshilin. So even though Avram Avinu lived in Eretz Yisrael, right? And in Eretz Yisrael, by the way, Erev Tavshilin, I didn't make the cheshbon, is not as common as in Chutz La'aretz. Avram Avinu was Mekayim Erev Tavshilin. Shenemar, it says Sorasai. What does Sorasai mean? Torah Shebichsav, Torah Shebal Peh. Okay, so that's one Gemara. I would just point out that Tosfos And actually in source number 4, the Ritva mentions Tosfos. Tosfos is not here. Tosfos asks the question, okay, Erev Tashilin is a beautiful mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to Rabbanan. So why do we choose Erev Tashilin? There could be so many mitzvahs. Yeah, the Til Shadayim. So many mitzvahs. Why Erev Tashilin? So the Ritva says that Erev Tashilin, if you look at the specifics of the mitzvah, and this is very important, we'll come back to this later, but what Erev Tashilin is about, but it seems to be the most lenient, and we have a view of, we don't take it as serious as other mitzvahs. Why? Because what's the point of Erev Tashilin? You want to make something for Shabbos before Yom Tov starts. So what do you make? So you make a kazayas of bread, a kazayas of food, an egg, and done, you're done. And it doesn't make a difference how big your family is. And even if you go ahead and you make an Erev Tashilin for the whole city, right? One egg, one roll, it's enough. He says, so that's, and also other thing is, and that's important, he says, that Erev Tashilin is a zecher ba'alma. To remember that you should make sure before Shabbos starts, before Yom Tov starts, that you know Yom Tov is coming. Don't forget about Shabbos. Make sure that something's ready for Shabbos. That's the mitzvah of Tashilin. If you do that, then you could cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos also. And that's the reason why even if Tashilin, where our stance for Tashilin, we're very makel, we're very lenient. You still, even a mitzvah like that, Avram Avinu was machmir, was strict on himself to Mekayim. Okay, hopefully we'll come back to that. But that's one Gemara. Then there's a second Gemara. The Gemara is Maseches Kedushin. That's at the end of the Masechta, and there the Mishnah says, Rabbi Nahorai Omer, Rabbi Nahorai says, hey, there's talking about professions. Einim malamed v'ni ala Torah. I will only teach my son Torah, and it talks about how great Torah is. And then it says, and you want to know how great Torah is? Look at Avram Avinu. V'chein, source number 2, Daf Pei Vei Zav and Aleph. V'chein Omer Avram Avinu. V'Avram Zokein. V'Hashem berechet Avram Bakol. Hashem was Avram everything. Matzinu she'asa Avram Avinu is kol Torah kula. Avram Avinu was Makayim the whole Torah until Nitla, until it was given Shenemar, quoting the same pasuk. So there's a Gemara, Mishnah, Maseches Kedushin, that it says Avram Avinu was Makayim the whole Torah. Then one last Gemara. This is Maseches Chulin. So this is talking about the Gid HaNosha. We know the Gid HaNosha that when Yaakov Avinu was had the, let's say, the conflict, the Sarah Shalesa, and he came out injured. So because of that, we weren't allowed. There became this halacha because of that, but we couldn't eat the Gid HaNosha. So the question is, so the Gemara there quotes that in Parshas, I believe it's Parshas Miketz, he says when Yosef Tzaddik was serving his brothers a meal, and they didn't know who Yosef was yet, so he served them. He took out he showed them. Listen, he says, I know you guys are Jews and everything. This is Mahadran min Mahadran, and he showed them that he shechted the animal, and he also showed them he took out the Gid HaNosha. So if you look at source number 3, so the Gemara says this. He says like this: Dover Shalach b'Yaakov. There's an idea of sent to Yaakov Gid HaNosha, Rach Yisrael, Shepasha Yisrael v'Chol Yisrael. This Isra being the Gid HaNosha. So the from the hindquarter, so that spread amongst all the Jews. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina. My dechsiv. What does it mean that when it says when Yosef wanted a meal for his brothers, it says v'tavach tabach v'achein. Paralem beis hashchita. He showed in the beis hashchita they shechted the animal properly. V'achein. Take out the Genasha from front of them so they should see. So the Gemara says, the fact that Yosef's brothers, Yosef was concerned that his brothers should see that he took out a Gid HaNosha, that means that Yosef's brothers did not eat the Gid HaNosha. Why didn't they eat the Gid HaNosha? Because it must be Gid HaNosha Nashra of Bnei Noach. The Gid HaNosha is usher for the Bnei Noach to eat. It doesn't mean the Bnei Noach. It means that it was usher for the Jewish people to eat, the tribe of the Jews, while they were still Bnei Noach. Okay, so that's what Gemara says. The fact that Yosef HaTzadik found it very important to go ahead and to show them the Gid HaNosha was taken out, that must mean that the Gid HaNosha, that it was usher for the Jewish people to eat the Gid HaNosha even before Matan Torah. So just very quickly on this, the Tzlach, and this is source number 6. The Tzlach quotes Tosfos. Tosfos says, what do you mean it was usher? Maybe it was just like Erev Tavshilin. Maybe just like since the Avos kept all the mitzvos, they kept getting Lasha also, but it wasn't It wasn't usher for them. They just chose to go ahead and to eat it. They're not to eat it. So Tosfos gives the answer. The fact that it says v'hachen implies prepare it for them. That means that not only it wasn't a chumrah, it would be usher for them to eat it with the gid anosha. Fine, but the tzlach goes on. The tzlach says the tzlach goes on, and the tzlach says that he asked the question, the Varant Murim. He says it's still very difficult. He says that because Tosfos goes asks and says that why were they noeg isser of gid anosha, right? He says obviously he says that everyone agrees. In other words, Tosfos says it's a very difficult Gemara because obviously they were noeg to not eat a gid anosha, and everyone knows and everyone agrees that the Bnei Noach, that the Jewish, the Shvatim and the Avos did all the mitzvos. So the whole Gemara, the Tzlach says, is difficult. And he goes on to explain what he thinks Pshat in the Gemara is. But he says the whole Gemara is difficult. What do you mean that it was us for them? The idea is that they went ahead and they kept every single mitzvah. So of course Yosef Tzaddik would take out the gid anosha in front of them. So that's the Tzlach. So now let's go through exactly what happened. Is it literal, not literal? So I want to start with source number 5, and source number 5 is called the Apirion on Sefer Bereshis. Who's the Apirion? The Apirion, I'm not sure if it's a sefer you've seen. It was written by a very famous Machaber, Rav Shlomo Gansfried, the one who wrote the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And about Shlomo Gansfried, I will tell you that I'm not sure if I remember the story properly, but one of my brothers was in elementary school, and I think his teacher said that there is no Jewish house without a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And he came home and he was looking for Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and there was no Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in the house of RABBI Soloveichik. He had a mini theological crisis at that point. He said to me, there wasn't a Mishnah Berurah, there was a Chai Adam. However, I do want to tell you that when we learned Maseches Nida, Hilchos Nida, my father used very often the Sefer Lechem V'Simla, which is a Perish and Hilchos Nida, Maseches Nida, and I remember him saying the godless of Shlomo Gansfried was that he was able to write a sefer that little children could learn, and that was the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and he was able to write a sefer that even the biggest Talmidei Chachamim could get something out of Lechem V'Simla. Now, when I was growing up, we did have a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in the house, so just but that's the so he wrote a Perish and a Chumash called Apirion, and he asked the question. And this is from this week's parsha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Yitzchak, "An Gibeon Yisrael Ekev Shama Avram Bekoli," and he quotes the Gemara in Kedushin, and he asks the question, how could Avram Avinu be Mekayim Kol Torah Kula? Because one of the mitzvahs of Kol Torah Kula is you have to put on tefillin. And he asked the question, he doesn't understand, he says. How could Avram Avinu put on tefillin? Because the halacha is that only someone who's chayiv in tefillin can write tefillin. And because Avram Avinu was not chayiv in tefillin, how can he write tefillin? So if Avram Avinu put on tefillin, he wasn't living kind of mitzvah, because tefillin written by someone that's not mechuyev in the mitzvah is not tefillin. That is the kasha of the Baal Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And he gives the answer, and he says, you know what? He says, the answer is that even though Avram Avinu was not chayiv in the mitzvah, but Avram Avinu caused the mitzvah. And someone who causes the mitzvah can also write tefillin. How did he cause the mitzvah? So when Avram Avinu was talking to the Melech Stom after the war, and Melech Stom said, keep most of the things, Avram said, michut ve'ad shrochnal. And so Chazal tell us, what does it mean, michut ve'ad shrochnal? Because he said those things, his descendants were zocher to two mitzvahs, tzitzis and tefillin, and because of that, he caused the mitzvah. And since he caused the mitzvah, so he went ahead and he was able to write the tefillin. He says, so that's what the Baal Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says. So obviously, according to Baal Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it's obvious that he took this Medrash, the Gemara, literally. That is the Baal Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Sefer Apirion, Bereshis Perek Vav. Source number 7, the Meromei Sada, from my family, the Nsiv. So he also takes that approach, and he asks the question. He says, it seems there are two Gemaras. There's a Gemara, there's a Mishnah, Maseches Kedushin, which we saw, where the Mishnah says, Avram Avinu was Asas Kol Torah Kula. And we have a Gemara, Maseches Yuma, where the word is not Asa, but the word is Kayim. And that's really and then that's Rav Shita, and then there's Rav Ashi. So he asked the question: what was Rav and Rav Ashi adding on to the Mishnah? The Mishnah for it's explicit Mishnah Maseches Kedushin that Avram Avinu was Makayim Kol Torah Kula. So Netziv and Meromei Sada. And by the way, if you want to see the whole Netziv, Meromei Sada is really a collection of everything that Tzip said elsewhere. I don't think he wrote. It's really a collection. But if you look, I think it's the second Harchev Davar in this week's Parsha. I think. I saw it this week. But the Meromei Sada says, in Maseches Kedushin, it's talking that Avram Avinu learned Kol Torah Kula. He learned Kol Torah Kula, and learning Torah really does something to you. In Maseches Yuma, it's not that he learned it, but he went ahead and he was able actually to do all the mitzvahs. So the Tzif takes that approach also, that he went ahead and he did all the mitzvahs. The last two commentaries that seem to imply that he did all the mitzvahs, I shouldn't say the last two. That's really incorrect. We'll get to it. The Or Chaim HaKadosh, Parshas Vayechi. So Parshas Vayechi, the Or Chaim asked the question. It's on. This is source number 8. Yechi Ruvain, Val Yamos. So he says, I'm sorry. That's Parshas Bracha. In Parshas Vayechi, when Yaakov Avinu says, Kochi V'Reishis Oni, that you really should have been the Bechor, right? You should have been the Bechor Melucha, Bechor to be the leader, and because of your impulsiveness, so Pachas Kamayim, you lost it. So the Or Chaim HaKadosh asks, I don't understand. It's halacha in the Torah that who gets Pishnayim, who gets 2 shears? The firstborn. So how could Yaakov Avinu, who went ahead and he was Makayim Kol Torah Kula, how could Yaakov Avinu have taken the firstborn rights away from Ruvain and given it to Yosef? So the idea that he says it like this. He says that what happened was that they were not mechuyev. They were not mechuyev to keep the Torah. He says, however, they saw that there was something very special with the Torah, and obviously, if they had a choice, they could keep the Torah. So let's say, for example, there are mitzvahs that we know that we for example, have choices to do. For example, let's say, for example, tzitzis, at least on a deraisa level, let's just say. The minhag is, the custom it's certainly a custom that we should wear tzitzis every single day. But midiraisa, the whole chiyuv to wear tzitzis is only if you have a arba kanfos, a 4-corner garment. However, he says a person wears the tzitzis, he gets a reward. Person doesn't, so there wouldn't be a punishment if he's not wearing a 4-corner garment. So the Or Chaim HaKadosh basically points out that because they loved the Kadosh Baruch Hu and they wanted to come close to Kadosh Baruch Hu, so they fulfilled everything. And he quotes the Gemara Maseches Yuma. He was Makayim even Erev Tavshilin. And he also taught his children, descendants, grandchildren. It's good to Mekayim, it's good to fulfill all the mitzvos. However, it says in the middle, the makom shahayuroim toelis, if they saw a purpose not to do the mitzvah. All right, so just for example, that when Yaakov Avinu saw that for him it would be, for whatever reason Yaakov saw, it would be okay to marry 2 sisters, even though marrying 2 sisters is usher. He says he was able to marry 2 sisters because he wasn't really obligated in the Torah. And he says, and is that really, and even if it turns out that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him al pi nevuah through prophecy, he did these mitzvos, they were like prophets. What does it mean they're like prophets? A prophet sometimes is allowed to go against the Torah, because he hears from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Temporarily, for example, the most famous example of somebody who went against the halach in the Torah because he was told by Kadosh Baruch Hu is Eliyahu at Har Carmel. Then Eliyahu Navi, Eliyahu the prophet, wanted to prove that you have to follow God and not Baal, so he decided to go ahead and have a rendezvous with the priest of Baal and set up 2 altars on the Har Carmel and see who God would answer, which one would get answered. And the truth is, Eliyahu Hanavi, when he did that, he violated the commandment in the Torah, because the law is you can only make sacrifices where at the Beit HaMikdash. But since he was a prophet is allowed temporarily to suspend. even a negative commandment in the Torah. So he says, so the Or Chaim says that our forefathers, they kept the mitzvos, and even if they were told by God to keep the mitzvos, it was through a prophecy, and therefore they are allowed to go ahead and they are allowed to suspend the law, and that's what Yaakov Avinu, he says, that's what Yaakov Avinu did, and it goes on to explain what Yehuda did with Tamar also, but it's not relevant for us, and for that reason, Yaakov Avinu felt that I have this right now to take away the firstborn from Reuven, because this temporarily I'm allowed at this point, like a prophet, to suspend what the Torah is going to say. That's how, especially because of the situation that it was before Matan Torah. So Or Chaim seems to take the same approach, that it was all they actually kept all the mitzvot. Okay, the last, not necessarily the last, but I want to deal with the Beis Halevi. Beis Halevi is Yosef Dov Levi Soloveitchik, my great-great-grandfather. So he also takes the same approach, and he says very simply. He says his approach is, let's say for example, and actually in this week's parsha, it sounds like the Avos kept Pesach, because in this week's parsha, when Rivka Imenu says to Yaakov, go get the two goats, one of the goats was for what? Korban Pesach, Rashi says. So what's going on? See, he says, we have a tendency to believe, the Beis Halevi says, that why do we eat matzah on Pesach? Because God took us out of Mitzrayim. Why do we, sit in the sukkah on Sukkot? Because we were in the Midbar, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu made Sukkot for us. He says, no. He says, the reason why God took us out of Mitzrayim is because we're going to eat matzah. Because we're going to eat Korban Pesach. That's the reason for the mitzvah. So yes, and then all of a sudden, once these miracles happened, God connected it. But God did all these things for us because we were willing to do these commandments. And these commandments are not intrinsically connected to the holidays. It happens that God connected them later on. And why do you say that? I mean, it obviously connected to the holidays, but it's not connected necessarily to leaving Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. Why do we say that? Because the Beis Halevi says that the Torah was there before the world was created. And he says, and this is what we tell the Ben Harash, the wicked son. He says the wicked son comes into the Seder, and the wicked son says, like, what's going on here? He says, you're eating, the unleavened bread. You're going ahead. He says, like, what's going on? Like, you had matzah in Mitzrayim. What's it all about? And we go ahead, why are we doing this? And he says, we go ahead and we say, you know what? We even did this before you left Mitzrayim. That night before you left, we had a Korban Pesach. We sacrificed the lamb. We had the matzah. Why? Because the reason God took us out is because we did the mitzvot. It's not because God took us out, we do the mitzvot. Because we did the mitzvot and will do the mitzvot, that's why God took us out of Mitzrayim. And he says, an example, he says, is it's not necessarily connected to leaving Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt, because even our forefathers went ahead, and what did our forefathers do? Our forefathers went ahead and they also kept all the commandments. How could they keep the commandments of eating matzah when they never left Mitzrayim, never left Egypt? It says, obviously, the mitzvos are done because God wants us to do the mitzvos, and then they were connected. They were connected to the holidays afterwards. Let's say, for example, when it comes to the rainbow. So we know that the rainbow is a sign that God will never bring a flood upon the world. So everyone asks the question, they say, what do you mean? He says, the rainbow was there. A rainbow is a natural phenomenon. It didn't happen in the year 1656. It happened 1657. It happened at the year 1. So the Ramban first wants to suggest that, no, it was a new creation, okay? And then he says, and if you listen to the Greek scientists, he says, then you have to say, because he says the Greek scientists say it was always there. He says you have to say that God just took it it was there, it was always there, and then after the Mabul, God connected it. So the Beis Halevi says the same thing. The mitzvos were always there, and that's why the forefathers did the mitzvos. It was just after the events happened, God connected it. So the Beis Halevi goes ahead and takes the same approach. I just want to finish off with one more person that basically takes, one more sheet that basically takes, or let's say two more actually, that basically takes that approach. So first of all, the Radvaz, so he says like this. He said, what's his problem? His problem is also, he says, the Jewish people, the Avos kept all the mitzvahs. So how could Yaakov marry two sisters? He says Yaakov didn't marry two sisters. Why not? Because Rachel and Leah were two sisters when they were not Jewish. But what happened when they married Yaakov? What happened to them? What did they do? They went through a conversion, and we know Gershon et Gayer, a convert who converts, Kikatan Shnoa Dami. No, be the Rabbanon, we have to still consider certain relations. But Yaakov, I guess, did not keep their Rabbanon for whatever reason. But he says they weren't sisters because they converted, and therefore they were reborn. They weren't sisters. Yaakov Avinu, that's in that would be the Radvaz and the Chelik Beis, Siman Tov Reish Tzadik Vav. So now so that's the approach of the Radvaz. The approach of the Rama in Siman Yud is that Avram Avinu kept all the mitzvos, but that was Avram. Yitzchak and Yaakov did not keep all the mitzvos, and that's why Yaakov married two sisters. And he says, Avram Avinu just went ahead, and Avram Avinu went ahead and he told his children to keep the Zay mitzvahs of Noach. He says to be nice and to be respectful, but he didn't tell them to keep all the mitzvahs. So sometimes you'll have in certain families, a father might have certain chumras. He won't expect his children to keep all the chumras. According to Rama, Yaakov Avinu went ahead and Avram Avinu just kept all the mitzvahs for himself, but not for everyone else, and that's why Yaakov was able to marry two sisters. Okay, so that is the approach of those Meforshim that want to take these Gemaras literally. The Rashba, and this is in source number 10, so he has a similar approach, but he adds a certain idea which is very, very important. And the Rashba says, and this is Chelik Aleph Siman Tzadik Daled, source number 10, Vehikshalach, Hech Kaimam, how could they keep the mitzvos, and they weren't yet commanded in the mitzvos? And also he asks that Yaakov Avinu married two sisters. So he points out and he says, listen, the Gemara says, as we mentioned, that Avram Avinu fulfilled Erev Tchumen. We didn't see that. He says, and he says, he points out, this is very important, that every single mitzvah is connected to some source of higher wisdom. And the bottom line is that the Chachma wants us to do these actions, and inside these actions, the wisdom we can find in these actions ideas that teach us ideas of wisdom, things that we have to know and incorporate. For example, let's take Erev Tavshilin. What's the point of Erev Tavshilin? So I said before, Erev Tavshilin is the idea that, Yom Tov's coming. So this year I think the last day of Pesach is on a Friday, right? Last day of Pesach on a Friday. Yom Tov's coming, and and the truth is that maybe in Eretz Yisrael it's not so bad in general, but especially if in Chutz La'aretz, and we don't have this year, or a 3-day Yom Tov, right? And the Yom Tov is Thursday, Friday. You're preparing all these meals. What happens to Shabbos, right? Shabbos can go on the back burner. So we have to really show that we're not going to forget about Shabbos. So what's the idea of Erev Tavshilin? And even though Erev Tavshilin is a din d'Rabbanan, the Maral Tiferes Yisrael says you can find a source for every d'Rabbanan in the Torah, and just HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the Chazal, the rabbis, to come up with it, but you can find a source in the Torah. The idea is that when you're involved in something that's very important, you might forget everything else. And the idea of Tavshilin is, don't forget, remember what's there, and don't forget. Sometimes you have a tendency, we're going to do this mitzvah, we forget about that mitzvah. I have a student, in my shir, he loves math. So it's all he thinks about is math. So I spoke to him, I said to him, you have other courses? Now I'm talking about Torah, other courses. He said, no, it's a problem I have. All I think about is math. But we have to realize that when we're going ahead and focusing on one thing, we can't forget other things that affect our lives. And that's the Tavshilin. So the Rashba says in source number 10 that every mitzvah is connected to a chachma. And that chachma is mechayeves esamaisa besmaniya. That chachma teaches us that we should do this action and not do another action. And then the other way around, we see what we can do, we learn ideas of chachma. And that's how our forefathers understood what the mitzvahs were. Because Avram Avinu says, whatever that means, but from his two kidneys came forth Chachma, and And because of that, Yehuda understood to do the mitzvah of Yibum with Tamar in a different way, even though he weren't commanded on it. And he commanded his children about this. And he says, and that's the idea. Also, the question is, how come Yaakov Avinu married two sisters? So he says, listen, every mitzvah, he says, depends on three pillars: the time, the place, and what you have. So he says, for Yaakov Avinu, it wasn't the time, and we know there's a place. However, the bottom line is that the Chochmah represents certain ideas, and there's certain ideas, and the actions are because of those ideas, and we're supposed to learn from the ideas' actions. And I'm sorry if you understand the ideas, and certainly us that we do the actions, we have to learn from the actions what the ideas of wisdom are should apply to the rest of our lives. This is very important. And he says, and Yaakov Avinu understood that even though it would be halacha in the Torah later on, and there was a certain idea behind it, it didn't apply to him. Just like, for example, a person can't keep Shabbos today. It's ridiculous to keep Shabbos today. Or let's say, I'm sure that before Hanukkah, President Trump will have a Hanukkah party in the White House. Okay, but it's not a Hanukkah party. You can't have a Hanukkah party before White House. Like, he has to do it. But he says, Yaakov Avinu, it didn't apply to him. The time wasn't there. And then he says everything else is very mysterious. He's not going to get into it. But he says that, and this is, I think, the most important idea, is that that the way the Avos came to the mitzvos was because they understood Chachma. In Chachma, you understand what you're supposed to do, and we who maybe don't have that level of wisdom, we have the actions, and for the action we have to learn what the wisdom is. So that is what the Rashba says. So based on that, I want to skip the Rambam for now. I want to do the Ramban. The Ramban is also in this week's parsha. So if you look at source number 15, Parach Vav, Pasuk Hey, the Ramban there says that, again, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Yitzchak, I'm going to give you Eretz Yisrael. I'm going to give Eretz Yisrael because your father, Yishmael, you listened to me. So what is they listen to me? So Rashi points out that you followed all the Gzeros, which seem to imply the enactments the rabbis made about forbidden relationships, and you followed all the mitzvos, that the rational mitzvos like theft and murder you discouraged, and also the chukim, those things that no one understands you did it all, like eating a pig and wearing shatnez. You kept everything, and even Torah Shabbat Peh and Allah Sinai. So Ramban says that it sounds like Rashi is basing what he says on the fact, the Gemara, that Avram Avinu was Mekayim the whole Torah, learned the whole Torah, and it brings other proofs. So then he asks the question, if that's the case, how could Yaakov have built a matzeva? In other words, the Torah says you can't have a matzeva, a one-stone altar, only an altar of many stones. And he says, and how could Yaakov Avinu have married two sisters? How could Amram, the father of Moshe Rabbeinu, have married his aunt? He says, and not only that, he says that Moshe Rabbeinu put up 12 matzevot. So if the Avos kept all the Torah, how could the descendants and Yaakov not all the Torah? So the Ramban, I would just say, we'll come to the Ramban. So Ramban says, Vulai Nemar. So what does it mean? He explains, no, it doesn't mean al peep shot that they kept all the mitzvos. The Ramban says that they kept all the Zayin mitzvot Bnei Noach, not all Taryag mitzvos, also not all 613 mitzvos. But there were certain commandments that were given to the descendants of Noach, and that they kept. Not only did they keep those, but if there was a need to make certain fences, other gzerot, decrees, to make sure you wouldn't violate the 7 Noachide laws, that they kept also. And they didn't worship idols, and they didn't go ahead and do Evra Minachai. And it's interesting, he also mentions they didn't mix breed animals and plants, and that could be because if someone, I think the Mefarshim point out that if someone mixed breeds animals and plants, you're sort of saying, God's work is not good enough. So it sort of be a rejection of what God does. I'm going to do something different than God. All right, he mentions that. And he says that the Bnei Noach were commanded not to mix breed animals. And he kept all those zaymis of Bnei Noach, all the 7 Noachide laws. And so he says, so according to Ramban, it seems clear that they didn't keep all the mitzvahs. He says they kept certain mitzvot. The mitzvahs they were supposed to keep. That's what Ramban says. Now, however, the Ramban has to relate to the words of Chazal. And Chazal said that they kept all the mitzvos. And this is very important. And what does that mean? So he says, it's very famous, what do you mean they kept all the mitzvos? Yaakov Avinu married 2 sisters. So the Ramban says, Yaakov Avinu, he married 2 sisters only in Chutz La'aretz. By the time he got back to Eretz Yisrael, what happened to Rachel? She died. So what does that mean? What does that mean? What do you mean? So in Chutz La'aretz it's okay to do Averos? What does that mean? So first of all, that's not a question because he wasn't given the Torah yet. But the answer is like this, and I actually heard this shot from my brother, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, in this last part of the Ramban. What does it mean? It means that they didn't have to keep the whole Torah. And as the Ramban said, they didn't. However, when they were our forefathers and they were our role models. And a role model has to be a role model for us. When did Yaakov Avinu become a role model for us? When did he become a role model? When he got back to Eretz Yisrael. That's when he became, and that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu went ahead and changed his name to Yisrael. Things changed. So, in other words, he had to be, so therefore, he didn't have to keep all the mitzvahs. When we got back to Eretz Yisrael, Chazal say, there they had to, not because they were obligated, but they did it because, why? Because they had to be a role model. So, when you're a role model, this might sound a little, it might not sound great, this is, you don't have to keep everything. In other words, you have to keep those mitzvot, which is important to be a role model for. That's essentially the idea. You know, I remember in the Soloveitchik family, they Reb Chaim did not make a bracha b'samim. Not make a bracha b'samim, and Rav Moshe make a bracha b'samim, and my father didn't make a bracha b'samim. I assume the Rav did not make a bracha b'samim either. I have no idea. It's not questions we discuss at family simchas. And you know, so I was when I was in Yeshiva University, there was you know, I used to be very, very extreme about my family's opinions. I remember, you know, so if someone was making Havdalah and they're making bracha and besamim, I can smell the besamim too because I'm not making the bracha. My father used to say, "What's pshat? We don't enjoy it." He says, "My father certainly did not like the way cloves smelled." Okay, and so there was the older man that ran the minyan. One of them, he says, his name was, I think, was Rabbi Friedman, Mr. Friedman, I forgot who it was. And he once saw Motzi Shabbos. I didn't smell the besamim. Why did you smell the besamim? So I told him, Chaim didn't smell the besamim. Rav Moshe didn't smell the besamim. My father doesn't smell the besamim. He says, because they don't know how to smell things, but you can smell it. Anyways, that being said, as Chatai Ani Maskir Hayom, I do make a bracha on besamim. Okay? And also, for example, my father, he would always go ahead and he would make bar meresh. That would be a problem, by the way, on an electric light. Today, it's not so simple to do that. And he once came to my house, and there I was making a bar meresh on a candle. And he actually got upset at me. He says, "Why are you doing that?" And it was before Havdalah, and you know, so I said, "Okay, forget it. I'll make it on an electric light." And then after Havdalah, I said, "Abba, you know," I said, "I'm making it on electric light on a candle because." So why was he? He was afraid that, you know, one of the things we're makban in our family is Rabbeinu Tam, and he was afraid that if I would make it on a candle, I might violate Rabbeinu Tam. So I said, I have to say, I think I can say I've always kept Rabbeinu Tam, but he said to me, I said I keep Rabbeinu Tam, and I'm doing it because I want my children to enjoy Havdalah. You know, it's cool. You light a candle, right? So he accepted that. In other words, sometimes you do things because you're a role model. So the Ramban, he says, yeah, they didn't keep all the mitzvos. But when they got to Eretz Yisrael, they became a role model. Then you have to keep certain mitzvos because it's a role model. But not everything has to be kept. You know, every single prat because you're a role model is not necessary. So according to Ramban, I want to suggest that I'm not sure. Certainly according to the Ramban, he didn't keep every mitzvah. And even according to the Perush of the Pshat of Chazal, that they kept all the mitzvos, he did certain things as a role model. That would be according to the Ramban. Now, the Rambam. Let's go to the Rambam for a second. So you look at the Rambam, and the Rambam clearly implies they did not keep every single mitzvah. In source number 13, the Rambam says, Paraktes Halacha Aleph, Al Shisha Devarim Nitztava Adam Rishon. Adam Rishon was commanded to keep 6 mitzvahs. Avodah Zarah, Birchas Hashem, not to curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shvichas Damim, not to murder, Gilei Arayos, not incest, Al Gezel, theft, Al Adinim, So dinim is machlokas Ramban what it is, whether it's to set up courts, set up a system of law or courts. The afal pisha kul hein kabal ben Moshe Rabbeinu, and even though all these things we received from Moshe Rabbeinu, vadas notolehen, he says mechlal devrei Torah yirash alel nitztav. They were commanded on these things. Hosted l'Noach ever minachai. Noach was commanded not to eat ever minachai, to not eat an animal, not to cut off a limb from a live animal and eat it. Fine. Nimsu sheva mitzvos. V'chein hoya hadav v'chol ha'olam ara Avraham. But Avraham v'nitztave yesrel elamila. Avraham was given another mitzvah. Now it's 8 mitzvahs they were commanded in Milah. Who, besides what he was commanded on, the Rambam adds, who he'd follow Shachris. What did he daven? He davened Shachris. So in other words, he says he was commanded on Bris Milah, but Shachris did it on his own. And then he goes on. Yitzchak kifrish meiser. Yitzchak separated meiser. The hostif tefillah acheres lefdos erayom, and he added on another tefillah towards evening. The Yaakov hostif gida nosha. It's interesting. Yaakov hostif. He wasn't commanded. This is according to the opinion that that obligation kicked in at Matan Torah. So the Kesef Mishnah discusses that. Okay, just a second. Like I think that's what it was saying. V'yispal arves, and he davened Ma'ariv. And Mitzrayim, Amram was commanded in other mitzvahs also, until Moshe Rabbeinu came along. So the Rambam clearly says that they didn't keep every single mitzvah. And then if you look at the Kesef Mishnah says like this. Just to answer your question, he says, what do you mean Avram didn't do Meiser? He says, the second line, the Pegos L'Aleph, Lafisha, Kibdo Malchit, he says, after all, he gave the Malchit Tzedek. So he said he didn't give the Torah's Meiser. He gave it because Malchit Tzedek, he wanted Mechabed Malchit Tzedek, Malchit Tzedek was Mechabed him. So because of that, he wanted to basically because of Koras HaTov, he wanted to give Malchit Tzedek something. He says, but Yitzchak was the one that did it l'shem meiser. Okay? But according to the Rambam, it's clear he did not keep every single mitzvah. Now, so again, what's the idea behind the Medrash, according to the Rambam, according to the Gemara? Now, I would just say one more thing. If you look at source number 18, source number 18 is from the Minchas Asher of Asher Weiss, his sefer on Parshas, on Sefer Bereshis. And there he quotes a letter, which I could not find. I can't say I looked really that hard. I couldn't find it online. I didn't have a set of Tshuvas HaRambam, but it was a letter that the Rambam wrote to Chazdoi Kreskis. And if you look there, it says, the Adam v'harishon v'noach v'avos lo kimus Torah klal. They were not Makayim the Torah at all. Amazing. V'afal pikein, and even still, so, the Rambam writes, Nochlu Gan Eden, inherited Gan Eden, Mishum Shehigiu Lishalmusam B'Mailos Hamidos B'Mailos Hasichlios. They reached perfection when it came to character traits and intellectual traits. That's what he says. The Rambam says, clearly that's what he says. Chazdoi Kreskis. So that seems the Rambam obviously, according to this, and according to Rambam, did not hold they kept all the mitzvahs in the Torah. And I think it's very important, and we'll finish up with 2 more points, to take notice of the Nefesh of Chaim, Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Rav Chaim Volozhiner, who felt that learning Torah Lishma means learning Torah for its own sake, for no other purposes, he says you have to understand that Torah purifies a person. And just like, and the Chazal compare learning Torah to going into mikvah, and just like going into mikvah purifies a person, learning Torah purifies a person. And and a person has to go ahead and a person, Adam HaYashir, he says, so the bottom line is, when we learn Torah, we shouldn't think of purifying ourselves. We learn about Torah, but to realize what the Torah does for us, the Torah does for all the worlds, it brings the worlds up. And then he says like this, he says, and this was the avoda of our forefathers, the avos, and all the tzaddikim are rishon early tzaddikim. When it says that they were Makayim the Torah before it was given, so it's mina behema, he says, that Noach knew Torah, Avinu knew Torah. What does it mean? He says, not because they did it minadin. Because if that's the case, he says, if they did it minadin, they wouldn't go ahead and they wouldn't have done certain things that seem to be against the Torah. But he says, Yaakov would not have married 2 wives. He says, so what happens is, they realized with their pure intellect what happens with every mitzvah do you do, and what every mitzvah what it does to the world, all right? And they realize what every avera, every sin can cause to the world to happen. And for that reason, that's the idea that he says, because of that, they were able to walk. They were able to walk with God. They understood the higher kochos, the power is above and the power is below, and they were able to understand they understand everything. So Yaakov Avinu, he realized, according to what his neshama or his soul was holding, that he could marry two sisters. We today don't have that, because we have the Torah and that's it. And I'll come back to that in a second. He says, however, that is the reason the Torah was not given to their forefathers. But when they learned Torah, they learned what the Torah can accomplish, and therefore anything that they felt they can accomplish the same by doing a certain thing they did. And if something they felt they couldn't accomplish, they wouldn't do. But the idea of that the Avos Kev Torah means they understood what every mitzvah can accomplish, similar to what the Rashba says. And that's what they did. They learned what you can accomplish with every action, and they would do it then. But not everything applied to them. And they understood that. And that's why Yaakov Avinu married two sisters. So what's the idea behind this? I think, and that's when they learned, they understood. That's what the Rambam says, that they reached in the letter to the Chazdoi Kreskes, they reached the intellectual perfection. What does that mean? They understood what every piece of wisdom, what it can accomplish, what you can do with it, and they were able to apply that to their own lives. And what do we learn from this? I think we learn from this like this: that we have to keep all mitzvahs. That's clear. And there's never an excuse not to go ahead and keep a mitzvah. We can go ahead and rationalize. Never an excuse. Once the Torah was given. And it's a shame to go ahead and do the mitzvahs and forget the reason behind the mitzvah. For example, Erev Tavshilin, as I gave. What's Erev Tavshilin about? It's about remembering Shabbos even though Yom Tov is here. So that's a chachma, an idea of wisdom. So when we're involved in one thing, we have to remember other things that are going on. And not to forget, because now we're involved in this area and this activity. Another example I would give is, let's say, there's a, without getting into particulars, let's say, there's a halacha, there's a custom, that after you should not eat fish together with meat. Okay? It's based on a certain gears in the Gemara, and it's paskin up, I think, in the Shulchan Aruch. The Rambam does not paskin this halacha. Does not paskin this halacha. Because the Rambam has a different girsa. The Magen Avram says the reason why Chazal said, according to this girsa, that you should not go, according to the Shita, that you should not go ahead and you should not eat fish with meat, is because they thought it was dangerous. We know today, the Shtana Teva, nature has changed, it's not dangerous. Okay, fine. My father, you should just know, Me'ikar Adin felt that probably it's not dangerous. But the custom is to be makbid, so we should be makbid. What's the reason behind this mitzvah? What's the reason? What's the reason behind this mitzvah? You got to be healthy. You got to be healthy. So therefore, a person who goes ahead and decides that he is going to be so makbid about not eating fish of meat, and then is not careful about what he eats in general, is not careful about smoking, is not careful about exercising, he missed the point of the mitzvah. And that is a chachma, that's a wisdom. And this applies to everything. We have to take all the mitzvahs, and besides that, of course, if we do it, we have to understand the idea, what the chachma elyon is, what we have to do with it. And unfortunately today, I think on some level we're missing that. I just want to finish off with the Kuzari, because I think I want to make sure, if I leave at this point, there might be a dangerous thing that might come out. So the Kuzari in Maimer Beis, Os Chavav, source 19, is talking to, the Rav, the Chacham, is talking to the king of the Kuzaris, and he was explaining to him, why we have Karbanos. And then he says, you should know, it's very nice that I said what the reason for Karbanos is. It's a very nice idea, because through the Karbanos we bring God down into this world. But he says, I'm not saying for sure this is the whole intention of the Karbanos, because then it's very simplistic. But he says, Aval Mashu Yoter Nifla V'Nala. What's more important is that it's the Torah from God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from God. He says, and therefore someone who does the Torah without asking questions, but he does it because God said to do it, he is the best. He is in the highest level, right? However, those people have not reached the highest level. And they have to ask, why God? What's the point behind it? The point is, I'm just saying, we have to keep all the mitzvahs because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us to. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not tell the Avos to. But the Avos understood the ideas behind it. And they did the mitzvahs because the mitzvahs affected them and inspired them. It taught them how to look at life and how to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what ideas we extrapolate from the mitzvahs, from the commandments. But certainly, we today have to keep the mitzvahs, should not forget what the Avos did. The Avos, as I said, according to Ramban, are our role models. And just like as role models, they understood the ideas behind the mitzvahs and how to apply it to our lives. It's very important that when we have a mitzvah, we try to understand what is the idea behind the mitzvahs. And I think that, again, it's important to always know that we have to go ahead and we have to do mitzvahs. We have to do all the commandments. But to understand the ideas, it would definitely lift us up more to come closer to the Avos, because every idea that comes out of a mitzvah, we can apply to all our lives and make everything we do avodas Hashem, and help us reach, as the Avos did, or come close. Come close to character, intellectual perfection. So, as I said, I'm not sure what the Avos did, but one thing I do know is that whatever was in the Torah, they took the deeper idea and found how to apply it to their lives, to make everything in their lives part of avodas Hashem, service of God.
His idea of perfection is Greek.
I want to tell you, my father knows the Kabbalah. It says, I read the Sfas Emes, and I find certain things that the Sfas Emes said based on Chassidus, and my father said also. So whatever,
That's fine, but these two things, the Rashba is the Nefesh HaChaim of Kabbalah.
Okay, but
he bases it on the Zohar. Rama would say the different idea of what Chachma is.
Okay, but I'm saying that I think the bottom, the Rambam certainly says that, I'm not, you're right. The Rambam certainly says that they might not have known Kol Torah. I don't know. I don't know about the Rambam for sure, right? But if they reach ethical perfection, a certain idea they definitely.
But according to the Rambam, like Aristotle did too.
Intellectual perfection. Certainly made mistakes.
It's a different type of intellectual perfection.
Tell me, what did your family do before electricity?
Which family?
Your family, from Abdullah.
Oh, that my time used a candle, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
If you're supposed to know the Tamei Mitzvah, so the reason people say purifies when they go over fly over here is there's no reason for it, because it all became because the ships used to sink, and so
I would just say
more people die every year, and could you say Birkat HaGomel every time you drive in a car?
So first of all, Chazal made a takana to make when you carry over the ocean. Okay, so a person could say.
We know the reason for that.
But just because you know reason for takana, we can't necessarily go ahead and say the takana doesn't apply anymore. Only Chazal can say the takana doesn't apply. Okay, so the question is it make sense? I think what's given is that sometimes it's okay to think that it's an opportunity to think that the truth is God saves our lives all the time. Okay, Chazal made a takana. Maybe Chazal around it, they will make the takana, but once Chazal made the takana, we can't get rid of the takana. Because once that happens, it's very dangerous. You know why? Because then we can start giving them all takanas to people. They'll say, I'm not doing this takana, I'm not doing that takana.
Because a lot of takanas, we don't know why. That's where we know why.
Yeah, okay, but we don't get rid of takanas. We don't get rid of takanas. Now, some people say Chazal never meant when you're flying and you're mamish in the ocean. Some people say that. Some people say not that way. But if you fell, it doesn't make a difference. You can't get rid of a takana. You can't, because otherwise it's very dangerous.
I'm not getting rid of takana. If I go on a ship in the sea, I'm on the Queen Mary, so I'll say it. But if I'm going on an airplane,
I was on the Queen Mary. I was on the Queen Mary. I didn't feel less. I actually got a little more scared on the plane, like Queen Mary. Oh yeah?
Yeah, and there's your brother.
What's your name? Let's go to my.
Shira Leader.
Okay, I'll send
and
her
my
down.
husband is Usher.
So I think